Hey everyone, welcome back to Tactical Magic. This is Molly Mandelberg, your host, and I have a special guest with me here today and talking about something that is totally up in the conversation of the world, at least on my social media feeds. It's a pretty constant dialogue and conversation, and that is the idea of boundaries, how we discover them, how we hold them, how we create them, and how we often can find them maybe showing up when they get crossed more than anything else. But I'm sure that's only part of what we're going to talk about today. So hang on tight. We'll be back in just a second. It's not just about mastering technology. It's not just about brand or messaging. It's not just about making more money. It's about showing up in a big way so your people can find you. This is about bringing your most wild and authentic self into the hustle and grind. Welcome to Tactical Magic, a business strategies podcast for the warrior goddess entrepreneur. Okay, so Candice Smiley is a mom, podcaster, social marketer, and essentialist. She has learned the power of saying no, listening to your own heart, and speaks openly about subtle abuse as it occurs in relationships, both personally and professionally. She's become a voice for listening to your own truth and speaking it clearly, powerfully, both at home, at work, and also in your life. She spends her time living in a tiny home, 250 square feet. That's like 3 times bigger than my tiny home of 76 square feet, sharing candidly with others how to live life after betrayal, to trust themselves, and to speak up for themselves and set powerful boundaries. Welcome to the show, Candice.
Thank you, Molly. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your own journey to being someone who broadcasts this as their message.
Well, I think it's mostly because I took quite a few wrong turns. And most of the time, if I look back and I'm really honest and I take, radical responsibility for how I got there, it's because I didn't listen to myself. And maybe I had never set an appropriate boundary. Maybe I didn't know I needed to set an appropriate boundary. Maybe I just assumed it was implied. But it's usually when a boundary got crossed. And then I did that thing that so many of us women do. We negotiate with ourselves. And it's that whole idea, if you give them an inch, they take a mile. And I think that that's very, 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 very true, regardless of what it is in my life. But a lot of my story, if you read my full bio, it has a ton of not so awesome key points in my life and some really great things that happened in my life. And a lot of those negative things happened because I allowed a boundary to be crossed, usually in a very small way at first. I rationalized it. I did a number of things that I think we do. We talk ourselves into things. We talk ourselves out of things. And so I ended up getting to this place where now I'm pretty passionate about talking to other women about that because we've been trained, I think, as a society to be nice girls. And the etymology of the word nice is actually stupid. And so since I realized that, I don't really want to be a nice girl and be a kind woman for sure. But I think the kindest women have the greatest boundaries. And there's a lot of safety in boundaries, both with the person you're in a relationship with, friendship, business, or otherwise, but also with yourself. And you're able to show up in an entirely different way when you know who you are, but also the parameters with which you operate in.
Totally. Super powerful. Are you willing to share some of the ways that those boundaries got crossed or how you started discovering them?
Yeah, for sure. So the big one, I think that sort of kicked everything off is I was 17. I was dating a fella and he was overseas. He came to visit me. Long story short, within 8 hours of him landing here, I had gone from never been kissed, never had a boyfriend to being sexually assaulted because I didn't know where my boundaries were. I mean, I knew where they were, but I didn't have any idea the language with which I would need to express when they got crossed by somebody I trusted, I loved, and all of those different things. I got manipulated, I got gaslit, you name it, long before I knew that those were words. And so that was really the starting point. And of course, once you let those boundaries be crossed once, it's really, really hard to reset your boundaries. And so I talk a lot about how if you don't set your boundaries properly, it's like having, a road sign that says, don't go here, right? Detour. And you're going to have to drag that sign all the way back to where you wanted it to be. Mm-hmm. And people are going to come crashing into it because it wasn't there before. So you have to reinforce your boundaries. And so I think it's one of those things that I wish I had learned better about knowing what my values were, not just inherently, this is my value, right? I value kindness. I value love. I value these things. I think if I had been a little bit more specific about those, then I would have known what to do that. And I was raised as a nice girl. And so I was never empowered by the people who love me the most, who were trying to set me up for life with the language that I might need. Hey, we hope nobody crosses your boundary. But if somebody crosses your boundary, you can say no. And I can very clearly remember in this instance and many instances that follow, whether it was business, friendship, or otherwise, I didn't want to set my boundary because I didn't want to make somebody else uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I negotiated with myself and was hella uncomfortable because I didn't have the courage to say, actually, this isn't cool for me and we need to take it back a notch.
Yeah. Yeah, this doesn't work for me. I think even just being aware of this doesn't work for me gets so like overturned by what would work for other people. Like we're so, as a gender and as like a society, taught that it's important that other people are comfortable, and it's your job to make other people comfortable. And like, you're the host of your life. And so you need to like cater to other people and make it right for them. And that can put any of our own needs or even an awareness of what does and doesn't work for us personally,
absolutely,
in the back seat so easily. And I've definitely been noticing that for myself. And yeah, the language around it and learning how to actually communicate a boundary or even discover that it's there in the first place without convincing yourself or justifying that something else is more important is like a huge lesson that we all have to learn.
Yeah, for sure.
Or we don't learn and we stay in that discomfort.
Right. And then it can be really hard. I know for me, when I realized that gossip and guilt is very much the language of the world, that gave me a lot of freedom to recognize, hey, when I set a boundary, I might feel some guilt from somebody because I'm changing it or it's not comfortable for them. And people are going to talk about you when you choose to take a stand and these sorts of things, because I know when I would say something like, hey, this isn't cool for me, oftentimes I'd be guilted into making the decision, sometimes very well-meaning, right? Somebody will say to me, this happened even the other day, someone said, well, I'm worried about you. And I said, I respect your concern, but this is why I'm making the decision. And they were saying, I was worried about you, just worried about you, which is justifying that they've heard where my stance is, and they're using their worry, their discomfort to guilt me into making a different choice. And then I get to say, I understand your concern. I hear it. And this is why I'm going to continue to make my decision. And that's a really challenging place to be, because it came from someone who I know loves me very much. And I had to sort of call out very gently and say, can you not guilt me into making a different choice? Because I understand that you're afraid. Let's talk about that, rather than have you guilt me into making a decision that I won't feel comfortable with just to make you comfortable. And they were like, I didn't mean it that way. And I said, I know, I'm going to put the words in your mouth that I know you meant to say, which is, you have a very big fear about this decision that I'm making. And, you know, that kind of conversation takes courage, because it usually shocks people and they've just sort of fallen into a habit. So that kind of thing.
It's an uncomfortable conversation to contradict people and to take a stand for what's true for you. And that's something that we have, depending on how we were brought up, very little experience doing. And it's something that takes practice, just like anything. Like, you don't walk into a gym and pick the 45-pound dumbbell. You start with the 5s or the 10s and you build up to that. And I think one of the beautiful things about the broadcasting that you're doing, the message that you're bringing to the world and the work that you're doing, is giving people a place where they can start to discover that and build that courage muscle to have conversations that are uncomfortable. And I will say, from my own track record of not great relationships and not great communication in those relationships, that very much just the courage to start the conversation in general, because there's all this fear of, I'm going to lose this person. They're going to be mad. I don't know how to handle it when someone's upset with me. All the stories we created, and from good reason, from plenty of, trauma and abuse that each of us have undergone in different ways. It comes from a very logical place, but the truth is, having those conversations not only won't kill you most of the time, but they will create a new space in that relationship where that confrontation actually becomes this doorway to more depth. And that's what's on the other side of that courage, is the possibility of something that really does work for you.
Amazing. You said that so brilliantly. And, for your listeners, I want you guys to pause, rewind, and listen to that again, because the way you brought all that together, that's it totally in a nutshell. Yeah. And I think that it's that depth that ultimately we're really craving. And I know that for me, when I started to do this, it was really, really, really uncomfortable. And I like to share that when I'm sharing my story, that you don't just get here in this place of integrity without it being challenging and difficult and failing often and failing forward and failing fast. But I remember someone said to me, you're only going to be uncomfortable when the emotion hits you and the hormone hits you that brings on that discomfort for a number of seconds. It's like less than a minute. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, I need to prepare myself that when I reset a boundary or I say something that I know is not going to be received well, there is going to be a negative reaction. They are allowed to experience their negative reaction. It's not my job to manage their emotional reaction, but it is my job to know why I'm doing this, stand up and communicate it as best I can, and to know that that's a normal feeling and it will pass. And then when it passes, I'll be able to move forward. And that, I know it sounds ridiculous, but just knowing that, accepting that, and really dealing in reality of the work that I was doing to change patterns, not just for me, but also for them, that was okay.
Yeah, it is okay. And the people that it's not okay for, that
they're not your people.
They're not your people. And I know that's really hard because I think that's one of the biggest fears that keeps us from that courage of having those conversations, of setting those boundaries and being that vulnerable is, what if I lose this person? And the truth is, we don't want to lose our people. We want to keep them and we want to do whatever the heck we can to keep them, especially if there's been trauma in your life. It's very uncomfortable and like extra upsetting to think that a relationship isn't going to last. And it's so important to recognize that you deserve to have people in your life, not only who can have these conversations with you and hold you accountable and be held accountable by you, but who celebrate it and welcome it.
Yeah.
And that will stand with you through that discomfort, even when they're triggered and you're triggered, and want to have that conversation with you, even if they don't want to, that they will be in that conversation with you and not abandon you because of it. And the people who will, they should go anyway.
Yes. I can't like, yes. You know, I agree completely. And I know that was certainly a challenge, is to really come to respect that people are really in your life for a reason, season, or a lifetime. And I think we need to really own that. And when you can do that, when we say no to something, right? When we set a boundary, when we're saying yes to everything all the time, you literally do, spend your life. And spend, the etymology of that word means to waste. So when you're spending your life on the wrong things, you're literally wasting your life, because we can make more money, we can make new friends, but you can't get back any time. Time is the non-renewable resource. So you have to start to value your time, which comes to that uncomfortable space about setting great boundaries, is you have to value yourself first before you can even imagine where the boundary is. And so when people say, well, how did you get there? And I said, well, I was a people pleaser. So it took me a long time. But I had to first start valuing me, not just valuing my time, and saying, well, I'm worth X number of dollars an hour and that sort of thing. Like some of those exercises go, but more than that, like I have to value myself so much that if I say I'm not going to do something, I don't do it. Because if I break my word to myself, I devalue myself in my own eyes, right? I disrespect myself and I lose respect for myself all at the same time. And so when I stopped worrying, which was hard, but I started putting myself first, as in, I will say no because I want to respect me first. And that is the greatest act of self-love I can do for myself. It became easier because the game changed from, yes, I'm going to disappoint you. And I have to, because if I don't, I will disappoint me. And I'm going to be with me until the end. So,
right.
Deep stuff.
That is deep stuff and super important. Yeah. I was, just thinking the last relationship that I was in, I was resourcing myself with facilitation because my God, did I need it. And what came first, of course, is the awareness of like, this doesn't work for me. What conversations can I have so that it can work for me? Because like you said, honoring me is the most important thing, even if we've made a habit out of honoring other people above ourselves. Yes. Once you get clear on that, okay, this doesn't work for me. What time are you willing to spend allowing it to continue not working for me, not working for you? And I was looking at, okay, I've had one relationship go on too long, or I was looking at my mother's relationship with my stepfather, which went on probably much too long, but she had to get, in any relationship, you have to get to the point where you're really fucking sure, or else you're just going to waffle and go back and forth.
100%. Yeah.
She did that. And I was looking at it. Am I willing to wait 9 years to be sure? Or am I willing to look at, is right now, is this true? Does this really not work for me? And so it's like, how much time are you willing to spend, or how how many years, or accidentally getting pregnant with some person, or like finally just, okay, I'll marry you, some person.
Yes.
Like, how much time are you willing to give to someone who won't have that conversation with you?
Exactly.
Yeah. And if it's about avoiding the discomfort to give up those years of your life, that's worth taking a really hard look at.
It is. And I agree completely. The breakup I had before, the gentleman I'm with now, we had to take a long, hard look at it. And it was really interesting for me, having gone through so much trauma, especially within my romantic relationships, that this was a relationship that I attracted. And I felt like it was a really great relationship. But I came to realize it wasn't the relationship I needed to be in. And that meant I had to have a breakup. And it was interesting to break up with somebody who I knew was good for me. Right? There wasn't, cheating. There wasn't any of these things that had often led to me breaking up in the past. I was just like, this isn't it. You're wonderful. I'm going to miss you, and I'm sad. And I don't necessarily have a specific reason. I just know this isn't where I need to be. And so saying no and setting some boundaries and resetting and focusing on my healing and health brought me the next relationship, because I got more and more clear about what we have to know what we don't want, so we can know what we do want. And I look at that now and think, I am so glad I went through all of those months of, this is really hard and I don't even understand, except my heart has more peace being broken up than it did when I was with you, to the person I end up meeting in the middle of all of that, and think, I'm so glad I did the work.
Right.
And so I think that that's the same with these boundaries is, you gotta do the work, and it's so much better on the other side, even if you have to let go of what you might currently have.
And even if what you're letting go of actually seems like it's okay,
it's
and
really
not
good.
wrong and bad, that makes, it's hard that way.
Yeah.
So what are some things that people can keep an eye out for that are sort of an indicator of, oh shoot, there's a boundary there that got crossed and I don't even know what it is yet?
How you feel. So I struggled with anxiety for years. It didn't come on until after the assault, which I didn't necessarily put two and two together. I was 17. And so it took me quite a while to come to that place. But for me, it can be, now that I've worked through it and done a lot of healing, a lot of therapy, which I loved. But now it can be, I'm late for things. I'll forget things. I'll have some anxiety. I can't sleep so much. I feel like I'm hungry and I don't really know what I'm looking for. So something will be off in my body physically. And I'm very tuned in that way. And I think a lot of women are. And even if you're tuned out to yourself, you can start to listen to these things. So to be as simply as, wow, I've been late for these two things. And oh, I forgot about this that I was going to do today. I'll stop and go, okay, where am I out of sync with myself? Because, I have everything I need and I'm an amazing person and I do my best to take care of myself. So what's out? And I can look back and go, oh, I said yes to this meeting and I didn't really want to say yes to this meeting. I got to fix the meeting thing. And then I can have a clearing conversation. Like today, I just said, hey, I don't feel like I'm supposed to be here at this meeting. I really appreciate that you set it up, but it's just not the right fit for me right now, right time, whatever it was. And they were like, oh yeah, no worries, don't worry about it. As soon as I did that, it's like poof. And so I would encourage people who are learning to tap into this. When I started to listen to myself after years of not listening to myself and being racked with anxiety and having trouble with depression and eating disorders and you name it, it was there. I just had to start looking for the feeling of relief. So it didn't feel like sunshine, lollipops, and roses. It felt like a little bit of a lift. This was a little bit better than the other option. And so I would just literally starting to follow. People say, well, follow your bliss. I'm like, but it wasn't blissful in the beginning. It was really hard. And I didn't know what I was doing. And it felt wrong half the time. But the feeling of relief would come. So I'd make a decision and then I go, okay, that does feel better than this. Okay, now what do I do about this? And so even when I was making tough decisions, I would have relief when it was over, even if it ended badly. And so I really followed that feeling of relief and just trusted that eventually that would turn into all the good, heart fuzzy emotions. But still to this day, that's probably the strongest emotion, is that even when I finally figure out where I'm out of sync, I'm like, there it is. So it's always this feeling of relief.
Yeah. And looking for those pieces and seeing, I've posted about this before in the past, of that there is no mess you can't clean up. And that goes to like across the board to choices you've made can always be unchosen. I mean, with the exception of childbirth, maybe. But
Maybe.
but adoption is a thing. But
Yeah, it is.
we're not going to talk about that whole shebang, but that most of the things that you chose and maybe felt heavy or that you agreed to or that you got into, even like leaving your home and going out on an adventure and like, shoot, it actually doesn't feel fun. You want to go home. So go back home.
Go home.
You can pretty much always get whatever job you quit and left.
Yes.
And pick back up where you left off or the equivalent. So yeah. And I love that about looking at and using your inner GPS, as Abraham Hicks would call it, your emotional well-being, your state of like good and bad and right and wrong. While we want to give up that duality and judgment and polarity as much as possible, your body is a like tuning fork.
Finely tuned tuning fork.
Very finely tuned, and it will tell you. And it takes practice to actually be willing to listen to that, but it's worth doing. And I love that you mentioned, of course, years of healing. I've been on a healing kick most of my life too, because when you need it, and you're smart if you go and get it. But I just want to highlight that too, because you don't have to figure this shit out on your own.
Please don't try. Like I had a therapy session today because I'm still working through acceptance and forgiveness and boundaries. I'm still working through some stuff where I have a career where I talk about this stuff, and I still, it's true about your medicine. What you need is likely what you're going to share with the world, because I'm literally in it. And I have a person that I call and say, I'm triggered, I'm angry, I need to find the acceptance. I have no relief right now. And she just sits there and helps me unpack whatever it is.
Yes, that is the stuff. So find support, find a resource, find a mentor, find Candice. There's amazing people out there who are literally tasked with holding space for you to walk this path and not have to figure it out all on your own. And the learning curve of getting help versus not getting help is a dramatically different experience. It's like walking through the dark when there's already someone sitting there with a flashlight. You just have to go find them and ask them to turn the flashlight on, and you can see it so much easier.
I will happily turn the flashlight on.
Yeah, for sure. Totally. So what's the best place for people to get a hold of you and find you and learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah, for sure. So as you heard, I'm essentialist. So I try to do less, but better. And so one of the places you can find me is TikTok. I'm going to be sharing the story of how I'm taking my family of 4 with 2 dogs and a cat, and we're going to move into the tiny house. And if not, there on my website, which is just CandiceSmiley.com, and whatever I'm doing and whatever I'm up to, that's there.
Awesome. And you have a podcast as well, don't you?
I do. Yeah. Create the Ripple podcast, which is the tagline of Trust the Niggle, Tell the Truth, where we talk literally about listening to that inner sense that something is right or that something is not so right. And then telling yourself the truth about it. The world may not deserve your truth, but you certainly do.
You certainly deserve your truth. Definitely. So definitely go check out Create the Ripple podcast. If you guys enjoyed this episode, there's going to be a whole lot more there on this topic, I'm sure, for you to dig into. And yeah, I don't know. I follow a lot of therapists and guides and people on social media, and I almost always stop to watch their videos because it's like generally something that I'm ready to hear. So I don't know how much of that content you're putting on your TikTok, but I imagine there will be some of that wisdom shared online too.
Yeah, I had to set up some boundaries and finally find some courage to say no to a few things that I was being encouraged to do because everybody's doing it. And I said, no, I think I just want to find my own lane and run in it. So yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit more about your tiny house too, though.
Oh my God. It was a total manifestation. One of the biggest things I've ever manifested. I had left the relationship. I was 36, back in my parents' basement. And I'm like, this is not cool. I'm ready for something. And so I literally said to the universe, I want a tiny house. I sketched it on my sketch pad. The next day I went on to Kijiji, which is one of the like buy and sell things. And wouldn't you know, the top thing, the exact price just reduced $10,000 less. So it was in my budget. It was like almost identical. There was one piece that wasn't missing. And I realize now it's much better that it's not in this house. So the universe had my back. Coolest thing ever. 2 lofts. You pull down ladders. So it feels like Swiss Family Robinson whenever we're in there. Brand new, never been lived in. We can't figure out who built this thing or anything like that. There's no sticker. There's no nothing.
It's just magical.
The story
universe.
I've been told is a family of 7 won it at some sort of those 50-50 auctions at a fair. And they couldn't do anything with it. So they sold it to a gal who's supposed to live in it with her fiance. They broke up and it was sitting on her dad's property. So I have no idea, except that I walked in and I'm like, this is literally my house. So yeah very cool.
Amazing
Stuff.
I had similar story of getting my van and building it out into a tiny house. Yeah,
that's amazing.
We'll talk more about that too.
Yeah, we need to talk about that. I'll have to have you on the show, which we've been talking about anyway, and we'll have to talk about living in smaller spaces so you can have a bigger life.
Definitely, yes. And following the knowing of like, this is what I want. It doesn't make sense. It's not standard. It's not what anybody else is doing. Because I mean, I started van life before van life was quite as viral as it is now. Mm-hmm. But it was the right thing for me. And so I had to move in that direction. And that inner knowing pointed me that way. So, I mean, definitely now everybody who's listening to this, go subscribe to Create the Ripple, because we'll have that conversation over on that show. We'll save it for another day. You've dropped so much wisdom on this episode already, but I always love to end with the question, are there any last words of wisdom that you'd like people to be left with?
I think I just want to remind whoever's listening today about what I had just said, right? The world doesn't necessarily deserve your truth, but you do. And I think for so many of us, you already know what you want to do and who you want to be and where you want to go and what that means. And so you just need to listen to you, whether it's writing it down, standing in front of the mirror. You need to do this. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Super great. Yeah. And I love the little feedback of that was super. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. And thank you everyone out there for listening. Whatever happens, keep asking big questions and taking bold action, because you are here for a reason. Bye.